All right, so designing a lifestyle with more time and mobility, I mean, who doesn't want that, right? We're diving deep into Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek, the expanded and updated edition. We really want to get into the meat of it, see what's practical, maybe challenge some of his ideas.
Definitely. It's a book that, well, gets people talking, that's for sure.
It does. So Ferriss starts off with this whole new rich thing, the NR. Like, they've figured out how to have it all. Time, freedom, even the money part. But honestly, sometimes it feels like he's just showing us two extremes. The overworked office person versus, like, the entrepreneur on a beach somewhere. Is it really that black and white?
It's a good question. I thought the same thing at first. Ferriss does make it sound kind of dramatic, but I think the point is more about changing how you think. For the NR, time and mobility are valuable, just like money is.
Yeah.
Imagine two people, right? Same income. One works 80 hours a week, the other works 10. Who is actually richer when you think about free time? It's that relative income, not just the dollar amount.
Okay, I see what you mean. So it's not about quitting your job tomorrow and flying off to, like, Bali. It's more about being deliberate with your time, making choices that fit what you care about.
Exactly. And Ferriss says what often stops us from making those choices is fear. So he has this exercise, he calls it fear setting.
Yeah, fear setting. It's not just saying what you're scared of. It's like really taking it apart. You have to think about the worst case, like what would actually happen if you went for it.
And the interesting thing is, when you do that, the fear usually doesn't seem as bad. Ferriss tells this story about a guy, Jean-Marc. He ended up in Ghana with almost no money, eating like cornmeal and spinach for months.
Wow, that's a pretty hardcore. But I guess the point is even that wasn't the end of the world.
Right. Jean-Marc realized even his worst case, he could handle it. And it turned out to be this amazing experience for him. Ferriss also says sometimes we hide our fear behind like fake optimism, staying in a job we hate, just hoping things will get better on their own.
Oh, that's so true. It's like we're scared to change things because what if it's worse? But then we're stuck in something that already kind of sucks.
Fear can really trap you. But once you face it head on, it loses its power. That's when you can actually start designing the life you want, what Ferriss calls dreamlining.
Okay, so dreamlining. When I first heard that, I thought it was going to be all like vision boards and stuff, but then I tried it and it was actually pretty practical.
It is. It's not just daydreaming. It's making those dreams into real goals. You figure out what you want to be, HAVE, and do. Then you break it down into 6-month, 12-month timelines. And what I found powerful, it makes you figure out the actual money you need, your target monthly income.
That's when it gets real, not just a fantasy anymore. You have a number tied to your dream. So for you, what was the biggest aha moment in that whole process?
I realized how much I was holding myself back. We all have these ideas about what's possible based on like how we grew up, our experiences, even just what society says. Dreamlining makes you question those ideas. Ask yourself, what if I could have anything?
I love that. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Everyone should ask themselves that. Okay, so we faced our fears, we figured out our dream lifestyle, but how do we actually start building it?
That's where we get into the how, the tactics and tools to make it happen. One of the biggest things, which we'll talk about next, is all about being productive. Not working harder, but working smarter.
Sounds interesting. Let's hear what Ferriss has to say about that. So we've got our foundation, right? Faced those fears, figured out that dream lifestyle. But now, the big question, how do we actually get the time and the energy to go after it?
This is where Ferriss brings in something I think is super important, the Pareto principle. You might know it as the 80-20 rule.
Okay, 80-20 rule, I've heard of it, but I'm not sure I really get how it works in real life.
It's actually pretty straightforward, but powerful. It says 80% of your results come from only 20% of what you do. So if you figure out that crucial 20%, the tasks, activities, even the people that are really driving your success, you can put your energy there and get way better results.
So it's like being super efficient, cutting out all that busy work and focusing on what actually makes a difference.
Exactly. Ferriss gives this great example. From his own business, he found out only 3% of his customers were bringing in 95% of his revenue.
Whoa, that's wild. So how do you actually find that crucial 20%? Seems like a lot of guesswork.
It does take some thinking and looking at yourself honestly. Ferriss says track your time for a week, then see which activities are giving you the biggest payoff. Could be certain projects, certain marketing strategies, even certain times of day when you're most productive.
Speaking of focusing on what matters, that brings us to one of Ferriss's more, shall we say, bold ideas, the low information diet. This one kind of freaked me out a bit. Are you saying we should, like, ignore the news? Wouldn't that make us totally uninformed?
I get that worry. We got to be clear what Ferriss is actually suggesting. He's not saying go live in a cave and cut yourself off. But he does have a good point about being picky with what information we take in. He says most news is irrelevant to our goals, and it can drain you emotionally, takes you away from actually doing stuff.
Oh, I know that feeling. You spend hours scrolling through news and social media and end up feeling more stressed than anything. But how do you find that balance? Staying informed enough to be a good citizen, but not getting sucked into the negativity?
It's a challenge, for sure. Ferriss recommends a few things: setting specific times for checking news, sticking to sources you trust that align with what you care about. And maybe the most important thing, ask yourself, is this information actually useful? Will it help me reach my goals, or is it just noise?
That's a great question to keep in mind. It's about being intentional with your information, just like you're intentional with your time. Okay, so we've talked about being productive and streamlining what we read and watch, but Ferriss takes it even further. He wants us to build a business that can practically run itself. He calls it your muse.
The muse is like the dream, right? A business that makes money without you having to constantly work on it. It sounds a little crazy, but Ferriss gives us a framework for actually making it happen.
Now, I'll be honest, when I first read about the muse, I was excited, but also like, whoa, this is a lot. Didn't know where to even start.
Lots of people feel that way. But remember, Ferriss is big on starting small, testing your ideas before you go all in.
So you don't need to quit your job and risk everything on some big venture right away.
Exactly. He says, find a product or service that fits a few rules. It can't cost more than $500 to test. It's got to be automatable within 4 weeks, and it can't need more than 1 day a week of your time once it's running.
Those are some pretty specific guidelines. But it makes sense. You don't want to create another job for yourself. He's got some good examples in the book, like the guy who built a successful business selling sound effects libraries online. Seems like something anyone could do, if they found the right niche.
Yeah, Doug's story is a good one. Shows how you can make a muse without inventing some brand new thing.
Yeah.
He's basically connecting the people who make the sound effects with the people who want them, keeping his costs super low.
That's smart. So what about tools or strategies for testing your ideas before you invest too much?
Ferriss loves online tools like Google AdWords. You can make targeted ads for your product or service, see how much interest there is before you spend tons of time and money developing it.
So it's like a cheap way to test the waters, see if people actually want what you're offering.
Exactly. He also talks a lot about automation, setting up systems that can handle things without you needing to be there all the time. That's how you get a business that works for you, not the other way around.
Okay, so we've covered being productive, being smart with information, even building a business that runs itself. But let's not forget the ultimate goal, escaping that 9 to 5. How realistic is it to go remote, especially if your company's not really into that whole work from anywhere thing?
That can be tough. But Ferriss has some good tips for negotiating remote work, even if your company's not all about the digital nomad life.
Let's face it, most companies are still pretty attached to that office setup, so how do you convince them to let you break free?
Ferriss talks about what he calls the hourglass approach.
Hourglass approach. Tell me more.
It's about starting with a short trial period. Work remotely for a bit, prove you can be productive and reliable. Then you use that success to get a longer-term agreement.
So you're showing them it works instead of just talking about it.
Right. And be prepared. Have a solid plan, showing how it benefits both you and the company. Think about what they might object to and have answers ready, like how you'll stay in touch with the team and make sure communication is clear.
Because that's usually the big worry, isn't it? How will I know you're actually working?
Exactly. And remember, negotiating is a skill. The more you do it, the better you get at asking for what you want.
And once you've got that freedom, Ferriss is all about those mini retirements. I love the idea of taking breaks and traveling, but does retirement sound a bit premature when you're still building your dream life?
Good point. But Ferriss isn't talking about the traditional retirement where you stop working completely. Mini retirements are more about taking longer periods of time for travel and exploring, no matter what age you are or what your career's like.
So it's getting away from that work till you're 65 mindset, living life on your own terms. But I can see how it would be easy to fall back into old habits, even when you're traveling. Finally free from the office, but then you're on your laptop checking email constantly. Basically just brought that workaholic mindset to a new location.
It's a real trap. Ferriss is serious about truly disconnecting during those mini retirements. Use that time for personal growth, exploration, actually experiencing a different way of life.
So it's not just about seeing new places, it's about being present, really absorbing those experiences.
Exactly. He talks about slowing down, being spontaneous, seeing the world with fresh eyes, stepping outside your comfort zone, questioning your ideas about how life should be.
Okay, so we've talked about escaping the 9 to 5, but what about when you're actually living that dream lifestyle? How do you keep it going, not slip back into those old patterns?
That's a great question, and it gets to what the 4-hour work week is really all about. It's not just a bunch of tricks or a one-time makeover. It's a constant process of designing your life and tweaking it as you go to match what you care about and what you want.
So it's not about reaching the destination, it's enjoying the journey.
Exactly. And that's what we'll get into in the final part of our deep dive.
Hmm.
How to stay motivated, keep growing, and keep designing a life that brings you joy and fulfillment.
Sounds like a perfect way to wrap things up. We'll be back after a quick break to get into that final chapter of lifestyle design. So we've talked about escaping the 9 to 5, taking those mini retirements. But let's be real, building your dream life, it's not a one and done kind of thing, is it? It's got to be an ongoing process.
You got it. And that's what really sticks with me from Ferriss. He's big on this idea that designing your life is all about experimenting and refining. It's not about finding the perfect plan and sticking to it no matter what, but more about adapting and changing as your needs and desires change.
Makes sense. I mean, our priorities change, right? The things we're interested in, even our values. Something that sounded amazing 5 years ago might not be so exciting now. So how do you stay flexible? Keep that feeling of, like, excitement and momentum going?
Ferriss talks about setting what he calls lifestyle design goals, totally separate from your work or career goals. Stuff like learning a language, taking up a hobby, even just spending more time with people you care about.
So it's like having things to look forward to outside of work, things that make your life richer, help you grow as a person. But how do you actually find the time for that stuff? Especially when you're still busy building your business or handling your career.
That's where all those principles we talked about come back in. The 80-20 rule, the low information diet, automation. By zeroing in on the most important tasks, cutting out distractions, and setting up systems that can run without you watching them all the time, you free up time and energy to go after those lifestyle design goals.
So it's all connected. It's not just working less, it's working smarter. And designing a life that lets you do the things you love, both in work and outside of it. I think one of the hardest things for people is staying motivated, though. It's easy to get fired up about these ideas, but when you're actually in it, it can be hard to keep that initial enthusiasm.
Motivation is definitely key. And Ferriss knows it can come and go. He has a few ideas for staying on track, though, like setting clear deadlines.
Yeah, having that accountability and support can make a huge difference. People who get what you're trying to do and cheer you on.
For sure. And remember, designing your ideal life isn't about being perfect. It's about progress. You'll have setbacks, you'll have tough times, but the important thing is to learn from them and keep adjusting.
So embracing the journey, even with the bumps along the way. And that's a pretty powerful idea, right? It means anyone can design a life they love, no matter where they're starting from.
Totally. The 4-hour work week has all these practical tips and stuff, but the main thing is changing your mindset. It's about taking control of your life and creating something that matches what you believe in and what you want.
Couldn't agree more. So what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from all of this?
The 4-hour work week gives you a roadmap, but ultimately you create your own path. Don't be scared to experiment, break the rules, challenge the way things are supposed to be. The best life is the one you build for yourself on your own terms.
Love it. So to all our listeners out there, go face those fears, figure out what you dream of, and start building that life of freedom and purpose. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into something we think you'll find fascinating. Until then, happy designing.